again. I'd like to take a seat. We're on our third and last panel. And this one focuses on the impact of new media on politics. The escalation of non-traditional media has affected the way news outlets report information and the way political campaigns communicate with others and voters. And it's given citizens a new opportunity to engage with reporters and campaigns through social media. These panelists will explore the changes in reporting, communication, and consumption of political news and information. Our panelists for new media and politics, the sphere of influence are Shane Vanderhart. You have to wave your hand. There you go. Shane is editor-in-chief of Caffeinated Communications Network, which consists of 3 different .com sources. Shane does communications work and social media consulting. His clients include American Principles Project, Iowa Association of Business and Industry, Iowa Right to Life, and the Iowa Grocers Association. Shane has 19 years of experience in youth ministry and youth work. He currently works with juvenile offenders in Des Moines. He's earned a BA in youth ministry from Trinity International University. Prior to that, he was a J School student here at Drake University.
I didn't know that.
Shane and his wife of 18 years have 3 kids, and they live in Pleasant Hill. Todd Richardson is Iowa regional editor for Patch.com. Along with 2 nominations for the Pulitzer Prize, his work has earned him the George Polk Award and the Robert F. Kennedy Award for Journalism. In addition, he has been named Times Mirror Journalist of the Year and has been an honoree and featured panel speaker at national and international conferences for investigative reporters and editors. Todd had European duties, including covering international politics, terrorism, and features, which took him to more than 25 countries in Europe and the Middle East. His television and radio experience includes nearly 4 years as a regular analyst for the BBC and several broadcast outlets in London, New York, Baltimore, and Virginia. Michael, where's Michael? Michael is particularly proud of Todd because Todd was indeed one of Michael's students. And at the time, there at Ohio University, he was also the editor of their paper, the Ohio University Post. How was that, Michael? Was that good? Okay. Tyler Kincaid is a well-known figure on our campus. He now works at the Huffington Post in Washington, D.C. He studied journalism and mass communications and political science at Iowa State. He's covered state politics for the Iowa Independent, contributed to the Huffington Post from Iowa, and was the first web-focused intern at KCCI. While at Iowa State, he was the editor-in-chief of Ethos magazine, and he was a multimedia journalist for the Iowa State Daily. He contributed to Iowa State TV and also wrote a fashion article for Trend.
Just one.
Craig Robertson founded and operates the IowaRepublican.com. He's a grad of St. Ambrose University with degrees in history and political science. Craig says a career in journalism was never anything I could have imagined. However, his professional path tells it differently. He served as the Southeast Iowa Field Director for Forbes for President and as the political director of the Republican Party. His 8 years of experience as a political fundraiser consultant has led him to his current role, running for FT, a profit online business targeting Iowa Republicans and their causes. That's our panelist. Our moderator is Chris Adams. Chris Adams is an investigative editor and reporter for the McClatchy Washington Bureau, working on national investigations for all of the company's papers. He previously worked at the Wall Street Journal and the New Orleans Times Biscayne. He's had several beats: education, the steel industry, healthcare, race relations, and the environment. And he's covered everything from a small-town Louisiana sheriff to the Martha Stewart stock trading case. Iowa State in 1988 with majors in journalism and political science, and later received a master's degree in political science from the University of New Orleans. While at ISU, he was editor of the Daily and also of Ethos. He has been awarded the school's top award, the James Schwartz Award, in 2000. In addition to all of his other awards, he was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in 1996, 1999, 2010. And in 2000, he was part of a 6-person journal team that won the Pulitzer for stories on Pentagon spending. Chris, the podium is yours.
Looking forward to this panel. You forgot to introduce our last guest. We have Jon Stewart in video. He's well known. I don't need to go over his bio. But I am going to ask your indulgence for a 4-minute clip from Jon Stewart, which is perfect for this session. It's about new media. It's about Twitter. It's about how it's infecting the news product and politics and why it is. So let's watch this and we'll get your guys' reaction to it also.
There's a hot new trend sweeping the nation, and the media can't get enough. Cool, let's go first to Twitter board if we possibly can. Can you Twitter?
On my Twitter page.
They're talking about Twitter.
Keep twittering us.
I'll be tweeting through the program.
Time to go between the tweets.
Here a tweet, there a tweet, twittering and tweeting.
We have a tweet on Twitter. Twitter, chirping.
Twitter time! Yeah, let's tweet these twatters tweeting their tweets. New technology sounds adorable. Yes, Twittering is here to stay. That's the subject of tonight's. This week, Twitter! For the uninitiated, here's how Twitter works. I have no idea. No idea how it works or why it is. Luckily, Congress does.
At one of the most august occasions of state,
the President of the United States.
Members of Congress not only kept their cell phones and Blackberries on, they used them constantly.
Twittering from the House floor, sending 140-character messages.
Why aren't we paying attention? There's a reason they don't allow cell phones in 7th grade classrooms. What bits of wisdom and insight were so important that they demanded immediate Twittering?
Somehow the best seats are reserved for senators.
One doesn't want to sound snarky, but it is nice not to see Cheney up there. Aggie basketball games about to start on ESPN2 for those of you who aren't going to bother watching Pelosi smirk for the next hour.
Wow! It's like you're right at the State of the Union address, sitting next to someone incredibly uninteresting. Our tech correspondent, Samantha B., joins us from Washington. Sam, thanks for joining us. Why has Twitter suddenly become such a big deal amongst legislators and the media elite?
Because it's awesome. Twitter offers real-time access to some of our most important leaders and news people's least important thoughts, 140 characters at a time. It's no wonder young people love it, according to reports about young people by middle-aged people.
Sam, these messages don't enlighten or inform. It's a gimmick that actually lessens the credibility of institutions in desperate need of authority. Sam, what are you doing?
What? Twitter? What?
I was asking about the effects Twitter has on our perception of the news media in Toronto.
Oh, sorry, I was twittering while you were talking. Sorry.
What were you twittering?
That you were talking. This stuff is a wizard.
Is that a new word for good? With regard to Obama's speech to Congress, a representative who's twittering isn't really paying full attention. And now they're advertising the fact that they weren't paying attention. What are you doing, Sam?
This is for my blog. Gives my blog followers a chance to see my facial expressions as you're talking to me in real time.
But you're on TV. They can see you right now in real time.
Well, not my profile, John. time to read my entire tweet.
Why?
A lot of them are typing their own tweets.
Why is Congress and the media jumping?
Okay, because we're rotting corpses, grabbing for any glimmer of relevance, John, hoping at some point one of these retarded things will be the vine that can rescue us from this quicksand. And don't think you're immune, cable boy. I heard TBS is developing a comedy news show that uses only shouted vowels.
They're on Valor?
Uh-huh.
Damn it!
Yeah.
Look, Sam, the media and the government are not suffering because their thoughts are too complex. They're struggling because they've confused new with good. People aren't clamoring for shorter, more inane chatter. They want...
Uh-huh.
What are you doing, Sam?
I'm checking out my stalker, John.
You have a stalker?
Yeah, I have like 97 of them. And I've only been on stalker for like a week. They follow me everywhere. My life is in mortal danger, but apparently young people like it. Ah, damn it. My stalker just grunted on my Twitter.
Thanks, Sam. Sam B, everybody. We'll be right back.
Okay. So that was. How do we get back to my full tabs?
Somebody tweet him, please.
Yes. So that was, I believe that was right after the State of the Union address in 2008. Jon Stewart, Old Man Stewart, was obviously making fun of Twitter. I make fun of Twitter. I don't use Twitter myself. I'm probably the one of the least appropriate people to do this particular panel for a couple of reasons. I work on investigative stories in which my story time is literally months or a year or so. I don't tweet news myself, although most of my colleagues do. And also, I do some social media. I have a Facebook account, but I have 0 friends, which my kids think is absolutely hilarious. But all these guys are the experts on it, and they're going to tell us about social media, their use of social media. I'm particularly interested in talking and getting your thoughts on a couple of pivotal issues. I mean, one of those is the transition, the way things used to be and the way they are now. For the students here, the way things are now, this is the way it's always been for you. For me and for these guys and for the professors here and the adult audience, the middle-aged to adult audience, we've seen this transition in the last couple of years, and it's been pretty phenomenal. And the second thing is there's this really interesting intersection between advocacy and straight journalism, and what is that intersection? What's the dividing line, and how do these guys work that? Carol gave us an intro of each of these of the speakers. I just want to flip through and kind of show you their websites. I'll give them each a little plug. Shane's is Caffeinated Thoughts, right?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. Shane's is caffeinatedthoughts.com. Tyler, here's his Huffington Post page. And you can find his Twitter feed and all his recent stories. Craig's IowaRepublican.com. And a lot of good look. It's a great looking site. Lots of good content here. I've been reading through all these the last couple of days. And Todd's Ames Patch, and you do the patches for all of Iowa, right?
9 patches in Iowa.
9 patches in Iowa. And one other quick plug, particularly for the students here as well as everybody else here. I, as part of the I oversee the ISU Journalism Society of Alumni and Friends, which we try to recruit students, graduating students, as well as people already out there in their careers to help develop a great big network of people around the country in all different sorts of communications fields. Basically, so young students coming out of Iowa State can find a mentor in PR and advertising and journalism, whatever the case may be, wherever they want to go. So I would ask you at some point to go check out our site, ISUJournalismFriends.org, and be sure to read our latest contribution, which is right here by Tyler. So Tyler wrote us a nice little story about his transition, leaving Iowa State, and what he's doing now. I'll give you a warning. If any of you make eye contact with me, I'll run you down and have you write something for me. So you might want to avoid me, I guess. And now we'll get back to the Twitter feed up here. Andy can help me with that. But to get started, Jon Stewart's line about why are we doing this? We're rotting corpses. We need to do something that's different. And I'm not going to call Todd a rotting corpse here, but you seem to have the most kind of old school experience working for the Baltimore Sun, which was a fabulous paper that must be nearly 200 years old, I would think. I'm not sure exactly when it founded. And so you've been through the transition from old school, old media to new media. The patch sites are among the newest, freshest types of media out there. So I was hoping maybe you could tell us a little bit about the transition and how are things similar and different from the way they were to what they are now.
Sure. I'm probably the second least qualified person to be here on the panel after you. I started with this job in June. And the transition from old school to new school is pretty dramatic. It's a very sharp learning curve, but it goes very quickly. So I can teach you now how to tweet.
Okay.
And not Twitter, as they kept saying. I had to correct myself on that. There's a lot of things that are the same. Good writing is good writing, whether it's appearing on the web or whether it's appearing in a newspaper. And particularly with the younger generation coming up, and a lot of my people around the state are the younger generation coming up, tweeting something, too often you have to kind of nudge them forward, and that's not where it ends. So I'll give you an example that happened in another patch, not in Iowa, so I'm not picking on my guys. Somebody went out and did a great story. They tweeted it. They put it on video. They had a photo gallery with it, and there was not a quote in the whole story. And so kind of taking those old school skills that you have and applying them to the new is a challenge for people my age. I'm 48 now, and we didn't have computers when I started in this business, really. We had those old Coyotes that were as big as this desk, and they'd zap out all the time on you. But the basics are still the same. You want to go out, you want to engage with people, you want to engage with your audience. We just engaged in a different way. The thing that struck me about the Jon Stewart video, and I'm a huge fan of Jon Stewart, I love his show, is that this is a new thing that's really not doing any good, that we have to have something new. Well, for me, that's how I would have looked at it probably as recently as 6 months ago. But what I see Twitter, its value is actually as a filtering device. So there is so much out there right now. If you want to see kind of just what you want to see and kind of wade through all the other stuff, my new best friend here from Huffington Post is how we do that. Here's how we operate. If I write a political story today, I'll tweet it once it's up on the site. I'll send it to these guys, and they will retweet it. Now, Huffington Post has how many followers? 1 million followers on your Twitter account? We have about 30,000. So when they retweet it, people will click on that story and they come to our site. And it's people who want to see Huffington Post stuff, and by extension, we're owned by the same company. We're both owned by AOL. They want to see that kind of political news, so now they can get just kind of the type of political news that they want. So for me, the transition has been dramatic on the technology side, but the basic roots to it, the need to get things correct and complete and to engage your audience are exactly the same as they were when I started in this 30 years ago.
Tyler, maybe if you could talk about, you did print experience, Ethos Print Magazine, daily print, online also, I know. Tell us a little bit about how kind of all-consuming the social media aspect of your current job is.
It depends on what I'm doing. If I'm in the office, there seems to be this culture in DC of people that don't ever get off Twitter, and from up until 6 p.m. it's just constantly making bad jokes. And right after the earthquake, someone tweeted that everyone in DC is making bad jokes and boosting their ego, so everything's normal. But I think what I've seen has been there's kind of a disconnect between those who get it and those who don't. In Iowa, there's a couple Iowa journalists, there's a couple at the Register that are awesome. Kathy Obradovich is great, and a lot of people out in D.C. are following her because she's almost giving a transcript of a candidate when they're at a campaign stop. And that's one of those things that is a benefit with Twitter. You go to these events, and there's a lot of things that'll get said that you can't really, when you go back and think, what was the news? What do I file into a story? You can't put everything in there. You see a lot, but it's hard to narrow it down. And then there's others who don't get it, who are just tweeting like Romney talking about ethanol, terrorism, and healthcare. And it's, well, yeah, I bet he is, but what's he saying about it? So it just opens up a way to expose people more to what you get to be at. A professor I had at this institute at Georgetown said that one of the basic things he was taught like 50 years ago was that being a journalist is going somewhere and then coming back and telling people what you saw because you went somewhere that they can't. And that's sort of the same thing. So like last weekend I was in the middle of Times Square when there was 10 to 20,000 protesters for Occupy Wall Street flooding through there. And the best thing I could do was not write a story that Reuters or AP is going to have with the numbers where they check in with the official count and everything, but to kind of let people know what I'm seeing there with my phone, getting a 30-second video, a couple photos, and I can show, when the police start bringing in horses, or if someone starts singing, they're singing Woody Guthrie songs in the middle of Times Square. That's the kind of stuff I can't really go back and necessarily write a story about, but it kind of opens up the door to let more people hear about it. And then like what was being said about tweeting it, like that's another big reason for me to use Twitter is I get more people to read my stuff and follow me, and I can use that for crowdsourcing later on, and it's just kind of, it rolls on to help you when you're doing your core journalism.
Craig, maybe could you give me a sense of how much you use the social media aspects as opposed to the traditional website, and then also tell me a little bit about which method gets you the most impact and which has the most reach, do you think?
Yeah, this is an interesting question for me. I pour pretty much everything that I do into the website because it is my business. It is my storefront. It is my bricks and mortar, so to speak. I use Twitter to, supplement that, to distribute information. And the thing that I love about it, and the reason I think it's so popular, is because it's instant. There is no filter. When I can follow people and see what's going on. I mean, I run a very small operation, tiny, and it allows me to follow people who are out there. So if news does break, I know what I need to. It cuts down the lead time. Instead of waiting till the actual story comes out somewhere, I can use Twitter to kind of cut down that. If I need to get to work on a subject, if something breaks, I can identify it quicker and start doing our own articles and stories on it, or even just thinking about how I want to respond to that kind of news. One of the things, I'm a high consumer of information. I just love information as much as I can get my hands on. And one of the things that Twitter allows me to do is to, during a Republican debate or any debate, it's fun to key in and follow certain people instantly through these debate processes, and to watch these campaigns, how they're doing battle, not only on the debate stage, but in the sphere of instant communication, fact-checking other candidates. Fascinating. And it really gets you a sense of whose campaign's up to speed, whose campaign lacks in that department, and to see, how at the end of the day does that alter the coverage of the event. So I use Twitter in a number of different ways, but mostly it's a great tool, like Tyler said. If you're at an event, you can almost document everything you're seeing. You can take pictures and upload them. It's a great way, and I think the technology that's now on our belts allows us to cover events instantly instead of having to wait until we travel back to a home-based desktop computer or laptop. I didn't know if there was the second question.
No, that's
okay.
Second. Shane, how much? Give me just give us a sense how much you use and what sort of feedback and reaction you get.
Okay. Well, unlike some of these guys, my political activity is purely voluntary. So, and I'm with the blogging that I do. It's I just do it. It's a hobby. I enjoy it. But Twitter, I use Twitter in a number of ways. One, to, like Craig mentioned, I use it as a news source to get breaking news. I filter via hashtags to kind of figure out who's talking about what particular topic at the time. I too watch it during debates. Personally, I have my own Twitter account where I will link to stories I've written. I'll share stories I've read, interact with different people. People have asked me questions via Twitter, and we can engage in a conversation that way. I have a one specific for my blog, which is mainly just used as an RSS feed because some people, they don't do Google Reader. They get their news via Twitter, so that's how I use it. Actually, I probably find, as far as what I do with Caffeinated Thoughts, Facebook's probably been more of a better tool for me than, say, Twitter has, as far as engaging with readers and getting them to come to the site and having conversations.
And any time that, as we're going along here, any questions from the audience, throw your hand up and I'll work in as best we can. I'll leave some time near the last third of this, or about 10 or 15 minutes to really open up questions. But Mike, come back to you, Craig. You talked about being a voracious reader of a lot of different media. Give me a sense, I guess a couple things. I mean, three things. Who reads you? What do you read? And how often, and just for my own information, how much of what you read is in dusty printed format these days?
Dusty printed format is probably about less than 1%. I mean, it's really, I consume almost all of my news through my phone. And just to kind of explain to you the news that I consume, and is easier to tell you how I do it. And so before I put on my glasses in the morning, I get the Politico daily rundown of what's going on, and I read through it. It's a great way to start the day. Like an hour later, ABC's comes in. It's usually different news, and read those. And then I go to Twitter, I go to Facebook, I see what my friends are talking about. You go to the Drudge Report, you go all over the web. And I mean, instead of opening up the Sunday morning newspaper to look through it, basically you're opening up your laptop, you're opening up your phone, and you're going from, site to site to see what's going on. And the nice thing about social media, like Facebook and Twitter, is that you can identify very quickly what the major story is and when it breaks. And so that's the most important thing for me, is because in addition to writing for my website, I also do a lot of media interviews. And so, frankly, it would be embarrassing if I didn't know what was going on. So that's why I start my day early, 5 in the morning, to see what's going on. And so that I can get up to speed on what's happening. And maybe that means I'm writing an article or commenting on something that happened. In terms of who reads me, we have a large footprint for Iowa Republicans and conservatives. But additionally, a lot of other reporters read the site and use it as almost like they use Twitter itself. It's a capsule of what's going on here in Iowa, where the focus of the website is all Republican politics, or really all politics in Iowa. And so they look at it, and I spend a lot of time talking with them, helping them, giving them leads. They bounce ideas off of me. So in addition to reporting, it's almost like, I always joke with them, it's almost like I'm a concierge service for national media who want to come into the state and cover these caucuses, which sometimes can be a little bit different for them, or things that they're not used to, that you can help, that I can help explain the process to them.
Chris, I want to follow up on something that you said and get the panel's reaction to it. You are at many times an investigative reporter, and also
Allegedly,
and Todd for years was an investigative reporter, and at United Press I was an investigative reporter. And the whole idea of tweeting your story is abhorrent to me, because it's tradition. We've got the story. For instance, Tyler Kincaid is, in the midst of this happening. Suppose he happened on a scoop, right? So, the whole world's full of how great Twitter is. I've got students here. When do you not tweet?
I've restrained myself right now.
I'll be honest. When I have something good, I go on lockdown. I don't talk. I don't take phone calls. I don't tweet. I don't do any of that. I mean, if I got a story, and the other thing is, I look at my wife and I say, "Hey, sweetheart, I'm sorry. I'm going to be writing all night, okay? Because I got to crank this out because it's almost an adrenaline rush, and you're scared that Tyler or Shane or someone is going to catch on to the story. So it's go, 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 and." There are times when you don't want to share it.
If I could jump on that, being in a newsroom, I mean, it's one thing when it's just you may be at home and you find it, and reporters will do that after hours and come up with a scoop. But there's a lot of things that I find out about in the newsroom that is not going to go live for a few hours or maybe 20 minutes, and so I know you don't even, my bosses don't even have to say don't mention this on Twitter. It's just kind of common sense. Another thing is that there's stuff that I know everyone in the newsroom knows about these scoops, but for like 2 months, but we haven't done anything with, and we don't know if it's going to go out, but we know we're smart enough not to say it.
You can tell us.
Yeah. Well.
Friends here.
But yeah, I mean, and then one thing I would say about when it comes to investigations is, like, one of the reporters there, he loves doing investigations and digging through all sorts of business transactions, and he's been working a lot on free trade deals. And every once in a while, he'll do what they call the Sunday morning beat, where you watch all the Sunday shows, where Meet the Press and ABC This Week and Fox News Sunday and everything. And then someone will probably make news, and you do a story about it, and it gets them a lot of traffic, a lot of people following them on Twitter or Facebook. And they do that not because they think that that's the great journalism they live for, but when they do another project that they spent 2 months on, they've got an audience built up to read it. And that's what matters to them, is they kind of sacrifice their Sunday morning, and then after 2 months of work, someone's actually going to read there.
Yeah, I think there could be a lot of confusion. He explained it better than I can, but I'll just jump onto that too. A lot of confusion of whether your tweets are the news or your tweets are a way to drive news to your site. And sometimes your tweets are the news. The example with the Occupy Iowa guys. You're shooting that out. Occupy Iowa is a great thing that happened to us because it's getting us all kinds of traffic because they're very social media savvy. We hashtag it with Occupy Iowa or Occupy Wall Street, and anything we put out, they come to our site for it. But when there's a scoop, and scoops these days are farther in between because there's a better chance than ever that somebody has it, and somebody's even going to tweet it now. You don't have to wait for the paper to come out the next day to say, damn, I knew we should have went with that a day earlier. Sometimes that tweet's going to come out at midnight. So I look at Twitter mainly, but not solely, as a way to drive traffic to our sites, to our news, not as a way to deliver the news.
And do you have a sense of, is it the best driver, or what are the other drivers too?
Facebook is far better for us than Twitter is. We build up relationships on Facebook. We get people to like us. We know the analytics that nobody ever almost unlikes you on Facebook. Mm-hmm. So the more they're exposed to you every day, the more likely they are going to go to your site. And I don't know the number offhand. It's some tens of millions of people using Facebook. That's a pretty good pool to be able to draw from.
Let me ask, I guess this is kind of for Craig and Shane. Tyler and Todd, you guys work for a huge organization that's testing things all over the country, testing the patches, testing different ways to make the Huffington Post to boost its traffic. You guys are kind of on your own. You're essentially doing it on your own. For you, well, start with you guys and then come back to you guys. For you guys, I mean, how do you figure out how to do it, and how do you figure out what works? And then, Tyler and Todd, is there basically a AOL HuffPost patch model that you just tap into, and that's just the system you use, or do you guys individually innovate? Maybe I can start down here.
Okay, well, I'm really great at learning what not to do. So I make mistakes. I've tried out, for instance, in this family of blogs I've tried out a couple new sites, and they bombed, so I took them down, And I actually, when I started blogging in 2006. It was just, I was just doing it, just personally blogging, and it suddenly just kind of took off. And just a little bit about my background. You probably heard it from my bio. I'm an evangelical. I blog from an evangelical point of view, at least I try to, from my perspective, what an evangelical point of view is. And I didn't know at the time, people were looking for, particular niches. Well, mine was just really eclectic. I would talk about life, I would talk about theology, I would talk about politics, and it was just this whole mishmash of things. And finally, I realized, wow, I have some people that are coming and reading, and they're interested in the theology stuff I'm talking about, and I have other people who are coming and reading, and they're just solely interested in the political stuff. So I finally said, need to actually create 2 different sites for that, and suddenly readership went up on both. I just learned trial and error. Another key move I made was bringing on other contributors. For the longest time, it was just me. Now I have some other folks writing for me, and that helps drive traffic as well.
I think for me that what works is that I've always kind of just embraced who I am. I think that when the site was launched, I remember Channel 13 News did a story about the website and another one that was launching at the same time, and kind of before the website even was live. The knock on it is that it's just a Republican news site. It's just going to be a cheerleading site. It's like where you go to get your Republican press release. It couldn't be further from the truth. I had no intention to build a website like that at all. But I think that, kind of like what Shane was speaking, I'm communicating to a specific person, a type of person. And so, I don't hide the fact that I'm a conservative Republican that's reporting on politics through that lens. And the reason why I've stuck to that and never wanted to get away from that is turn on your TV. Look at MSNBC. Look at Fox News. They do pretty well. And I'm a print version of that. But I believe the difference is that I believe all growth in the media will come locally and in niche news. And so my niche is politics. And I think that if I started my website and said, look, I want to compete with the Huffington Post, well, good luck. But I can start and I can compete with a political site in Iowa where my competition is really, in my opinion, a handful of newspapers. Because I offer something different, and I offer a different lens in which we look at things. And I think that so many times, and it's no disrespect to the newspapers. I think the difference is I have a background. I come from politics. It's like, who do you want to get your tax advice from? An accountant that knows, the ins and outs and filing your taxes? And so in terms of politics, I've worked on campaigns. I've raised money for campaigns. I've helped run a political party. Okay, so when I'm reporting back onto what's going on, and not just what's going on, I think that's maybe the biggest difference between my site and traditional news sites. We go into why it happens. Why did this happen? Why does this matter? Why should we be looking at it in a certain way? And I think that's what makes a niche. And so there are people that are looking for that type of stuff. They do care about what's going on, but they also want to know why it's going on and why it matters. And I think that's one niche that I've been able to use to my advantage, that I can fill that need that people have when they're looking for political coverage.
Yeah, I would just, before I forget, I want to mention that Twitter is not, like, when people talk about social media, Twitter is not social media as in that's all it is. One of the things that I think is undervalued by journalists, but they're starting to catch on, is Tumblr. If you hashtag things right, if you put in some keywords, and you've got like a good visual or a good photo, a good video, that's going to go viral pretty well, and then pop up in search engines more so than a tweet. So that's one thing I'm trying to grasp to. What Craig was just saying reminded me of, there's a couple other news sites in Iowa that are a little smaller, but one of the things that bothers me is that they go to all these big events and then they report on who said what, but then there's no context. And it doesn't explain anything. It doesn't help me as a reader if I read something and, okay, they said that, but you're just kind of repeating like a quick dispatch. It's not helpful. But I think for me, even though I may have this outlet that I'm lucky enough to be a part of that has this network, I don't want to lose that audience should I leave, because I don't expect to be at one outlet my whole career. I don't think that happens very much. But the most satisfying thing to me as a journalist is just knowing that people read it. And then a debate may happen. I may get a lot of hate mail, some incoherent ones that make me laugh, but that's fine. Like, I just want to know that someone read it. That's the biggest satisfaction to me. And so when I leave, I want to make sure that someone's still kind of following me as a journalist. And then, you know, like the whole, you know, going from a certain angle, there are people looking for these niches or just a specific topic. And, you know, I just want to bring up the power that Occupy Wall Street has had, because whether or not you agree with them or you like the protests, they've shown that CNN is irrelevant, that they exploded into over 1,000 cities within 2 weeks, in 82 countries within a month, without a lot of media coverage, at least early on, until there was things going viral, like on YouTube with pepper spray, which people probably, you know, hashtag it right, they put the right keywords in, and that kind of spreads, and then CNN and Politico go, oh, maybe we should do a little thing on that, and they're playing catch up to someone who may have been paying attention to it from the beginning. And I think that's one thing that when you step outside of politics and what's influencing politics, that is a movement right there that's basically powered by social media to get their message out.
Those guys gave you kind of the 30,000-foot view, and just kind of get down to the 30-foot view. Is being an editor for Patch can be very humbling, because you think you know what's important, but we get a number every day. So it's not a circulation. When I was with the Sun, I could say Sunday front, 400,000 readers. Well, I was delusional. Of course, 400,000 people. That may have been how many newspapers went out. With Patch, we could go on, and I was insisting early in the year on high school football coverage because I figured it was important. Our mission is hyper-local news. And then I'm looking at the analytics, and I get numbers every single morning, and I can tell you exactly how many people clicked on those high school football pictures, and it was almost nobody. And then, much to my surprise, Iowa State football, tons of hits, absolutely tons. I didn't think they would come to our site for that, but they are. So, you know, how do you know what's working is we drill into the numbers as deep as we possibly can. And in Iowa, what works statewide is politics, probably obviously. And then the hyper-local, what's going on, what do you need to know to help your kids today kind of stuff. And when we drill into those numbers, we see clicks all over the place.
I'm just a quick aside, I'm very curious, why weren't they looking at the high school football photos?
I wish I knew, really. And that's the other part of it, is some of the numbers you can figure things out. Some of you just have to extrapolate and try and figure it out. And you know, I like to think I got in journalism for the right reasons, all the corny reasons that you think of, but it happens to be true. To give voice to the voiceless, to kind of shed some light on people who don't have the fortune that we have. And, you know, if those stories aren't driving traffic, do I stick with them? And, you know, my approach to feel good about myself and to help the company succeed is to try to find a different way to promote them. So with high school football as the example, I don't know at this point whether we weren't promoting it correctly. But I can tell you when we do Cover It Live for high school football, all kinds of traffic comes through. And Cover It Live, for those who don't know, it's a rolling blog, and people from all over will put in their football scores. Now, in retrospect, that makes total sense. If somebody's watching the Ames high school football team, they know the score. But they might be interested in 2 cities over what's going on there because they might be playing them in the playoffs, or they might have gone there or whatever. So, you know, the thing I love about Patch and hate about Patch is we make mistakes. And when we do, we say, this isn't working. We're not going to do my personal experience, the newspaper model of continuing to do the same thing wrong. Mm-hmm. We'll just say, we're not doing that anymore. Let's try it this way.
Let me correct something else. You talked about how, you know, virtually nothing you read is print version, and you get a sense of you quickly get a sense of the story today from the huge stream of information you're getting from all the other various sources. When you said that, I was struck by the fact Iowa is a very old state, so it probably has a bigger audience of traditional older print readers than most states do. Do you have a sense from the people who are, I mean, do you think that you're reaching the full range of your potential audience of conservative Iowans, young and old, or are you mostly getting the younger ones?
Well, I think I'm getting an age frame of, the young, to the, still working type folks. But I'll tell you, the one thing that I did is I've published 2 or 3 actual hard copy magazines of work. And I think that was important for me because, again, I look at it as my brick and mortar. How do I get someone to go to the website online? And so we've produced 3 different timely issues. So like for the Republican State Convention, we distributed 3,000 magazines that was all focused on Iowa politics, and it was new content that wasn't on the website, a little bit different take. It was more aimed at those maybe older conservative readers so that they at least knew that we existed. And so we try to find opportunities where we can do that. Again, I will admit it is nearly impossible for me to produce a magazine like that during the caucuses because the news moves so fast. And the thing that I just can't do is produce for a fixed cost, a product that the minute it comes out, it's dated. So the nice thing with the convention and all of those things, I have enough lead time where I can produce a piece that introduces the website to other people. So we actually have done things to reach out. The other thing that I do is I do a lot of radio interviews, travel the state, and still network. I mean, I organized over 30 counties in the state for Steve Forbes back in 1999. The great thing about Iowa is all those connections kind of still exist. And so I know a lot of activists across the state. So, I can tell them about the site. There's a relationship. I also think that email is important for those older readers because I think that more and more people realize to stay connected and to communicate, email addresses is like the first thing that they'll get. So we try to do things that way too.
Let me ask, anybody else want to talk about that? Let me ask another question, kind of throw it out to any of you. We've been talking a lot about the mechanics of the journalism side of it. What impact do you think social media and the prevalence of it and the fact that everybody's got an iPhone, they can catch any candidate, even if there's not a traditional reporter in the room, what kind of impact does that have on how the politicians are behaving? If, they know that there are 40 potential reporters right here in this room who could post something to the wide audience if they wanted to. How does that change what the politicians do?
Well, I'll speak from personal experience with the Branstad campaign. I was invited to a meeting back in, I guess it had been 2010, right before he was about ready to launch his campaign. And he was meeting with different social conservative leaders, and I was invited. He encouraged us to record the meeting, and suddenly he talked about how he wasn't going to be focusing on the gay marriage issue in the state of Iowa. So a couple of us also blog, and we went back to our offices, and about an hour later I had a post up, and suddenly that got picked up by a variety of different news sources, and suddenly it was like welcome to 24/7 world. Governor Branstad, he wasn't used to that. I'm sure it's put a lot of politicians on guard whenever they see cell phones around, because you just never know. I was able to go to the Palin movie premiere, The Undefeated, and didn't realize she was going to be speaking at the end. I didn't have my regular camera with me, but I did have my cell phone, so I took a video of it, and that ended up on Fox News. So you never know what's going. I'm sure they're very guarded. They try to watch what they say, but it's impossible to be careful 24/7.
Do you guys get a sense? Do politicians ever let their guard down around you, or in an audience setting where they might have before?
A couple weeks ago, I was following some unemployed people who were going around the Senate Hart office building to lobby super committee members, and then they were lobbying other senators just to pass the jobs plan. And it was kind of funny because these guys really didn't know who the politicians were, and they were going to Pat Toomey's office from Pennsylvania. And they didn't realize it, and I'm just kind of following his media. And then Pat Toomey comes down the office, and he's reaching in his pocket, and a pack of Listerine strips comes out, and he looks back, and it was like 2 seconds, but he thought about picking it up, noticed that a Think Progress blogger was there with a flip cam, and was aiming right at him, and he just turned around and dashed into his office, and then let his staff deal with them coming in. So I think that they are, they're trying to watch themselves. They're also engaging in Twitter, and some of them will have little fights with you, or maybe not me, but maybe their staff will. Eric Cantor's office has a couple people who really like to argue immediately if they don't agree. But I think they're just finding different ways to engage, and I think they probably are a little more guarded. So it's probably, in this campaign season here, it's probably these smaller town events, like, in Pella, versus if Palin was in Des Moines, like at the State Fair, where there's a media horde there, there's going to be less of a guard up.
So let me ask a quick aside, Tyler, did the sources, the politicians, do they see you in HuffPost? Do they see you as mainstream right now, or are you still considered as alternative blogger type media? I mean, HuffPost is so big and so prominent now.
Well, I think it's some of them view us as we're their allies. Some of them view us as the enemy. Some of us I think a lot of them are starting to come to this conclusion that there's a lot of different outlets there, and they've got to be ready to engage a lot of them. I've talked with Steve King, and he's very conservative, but he doesn't have a problem talking to someone who he thinks is a very liberal journalist. Like, I think the good ones are going to be ready to just kind of have a dialogue with whatever bent you're going to be. I think it just varies, really. But I think that they recognize that we have this audience, and once you've got an audience, you gotta give them something sometime.
There's a number out this morning, Chris. On my way in here, I was in a phone meeting on here, and Huffington Post has become the #1 source of political news on the web, and that's for Republicans as well as Democrats. So I think they're kind of catching on that. Kind of, if you think somebody's liberal and they're going to speak, you're probably best getting in that conversation.
I was just going to add that I don't think it's just the politicians that need to be fearful or mindful of people with cell phone cameras and recording devices. I think it's for all walks of life. I mean, we've seen news stories in Iowa where a president of a college is at Okoboji with a student with alcohol. And what does that lead to? I mean, so it's not just politicians. It's not just anyone. I mean, I think that anything is. I'm mindful of it. I don't want to tweet something that would hurt my credibility. I don't want to have pictures taken of me that I would be embarrassed of, because it would hurt me in terms of business. And I think we all need to be mindful that everyone today has a video camera, a voice recorder, and a regular still camera on their belt. So, we should behave accordingly.
Let me toss out here. Kathy, you haven't tweeted.
I did want to ask you, one thing I've encountered on the campaign trail a lot is interest groups basically coming out as their own reporters. And they're coming out and they're doing their best to, a lot of times, ask gotcha questions of candidates. And then they shot that video to the mainstream media. Two things. One, are you concerned at all that this might actually chill access for folks like you and me? Because frankly, I'm concerned about it. And secondly, is that something that you see happening a lot on the campaign trail?
I'll take that. The most recent experience I had with that is I was covering Michelle Bachmann in Grinnell, and they had about 50 protesters from Grinnell College show up at Danny Carroll's pumpkin farm where the event was going to be held, and they were all very polite and they all waited. But the Bachmann campaign obviously didn't go forward with their event. They did it privately in the house, and there was this mix of, there was maybe 5-6 people in the media were there, but all these kids also had cell phones and all that too. And so at one point, I actually thought the Bachmann campaign handled this aspect of it very well. At one point, they just, her media spokesperson, Al Stewart, came out and was talking to the members of the press that were there and explaining to them what was going to happen next with her movements on the farm. And, there was additional people there. And they just went through and made sure that the credentialed media or the people that they knew were their traditional sources were going to be the ones who follow her. We've seen the Bachmann campaign and the Perry campaign require you to be credentialed media at their events. I think we're going to see more of that so that they know they have a handle of who's there, and not just everyone with a video camera is considered media anymore. So I think we're going to see more of that. I think the bigger question is what do you do with local campaigns that really don't have press operations of that size to handle credentialing of maybe an event that doesn't have hardly anyone at it. So I think it will have an impact. But I really think that, again, a well-run campaign or institution can manage this situation.
Any other question on that? Time for another question or two?
Yeah, I've been processing what you said the whole time. Maybe I am old meat. I'm a print.
As a newspaper guy, I appreciate it.
But the question, you have these magnificent tools to communicate, and we're aggregating a cluster here and a cluster here. It seems that the mainstream media, whatever you do, really isn't validated until it goes into the mainstream media, until it's in the Des Moines Register, till it's on the television, till it's in the news. I don't, at this point, maybe we're on times moving forward and things will change. But I don't see this being what's happening on your websites being news in and of itself.
I totally disagree with you, respectfully. I do think it's news, and I think that the reason why it is news, and I don't think that in terms of validation of the story, I don't think that anyone who consumes the product on my website needs it to be validated to be credible. I think you can read it, and I think you can say, is that fair or not? And I think that, I love it when it gets into the traditional news stream. I think that's the greatest compliment that someone can give me. But I think that, who's it news for? That's almost the question we have to get to. I don't think it can be considered just newsworthy because it appeared in a certain publication. I think news is news. And it doesn't matter if the Iowa Republican has news on it or the Des Moines Register has news on it. And I think that you can look at certain situations. For example, we had Republicans had a leadership fight in the state Senate that's been going on for a long time, but it's been hot for the last 3 weeks. That story was broken on my website. And granted, the news media picked it up, but to say that it wasn't news until it was verified, no one was speaking. No, you couldn't get Senator Bill Dix, who was having the leadership charge, you couldn't get him to return a phone call. Is it not news then? It is news. And I think that having someone who has credibility, and I think that's one thing I'm mindful of. I have to build credibility for it to be news. I have to make sure that my product is seen as legitimate. And I think that, but to say that it has to be somehow validated through traditional news for it to be considered news, I just totally disagree with.
Last comment you have.
Just to add on, I think it is, and it's kind of what you were asking about whether Huffington Post is considered mainstream or kind of alternative. It does depend on building up credibility. So if you're going to be alternative, it's one thing if you're from an outlet that may be considered kind of alternate or biased one way or another. But as a reporter, are you fair? Are you still objective? Journalism was born in the roots of being partisan. So I'm not worried about that, but I'm worried about as long as someone stays fair, they can still do it well. And then it's one thing when I'm reading the Iowa Republican or Caffeinated Thoughts, or Patch, because that's all local. Those people should know what's going on in Iowa better than someone who's in New York at CNN or the Washington Post, who's just kind of making a guess from what they've seen and assuming that, like one of the worst things is they think that Iowa's this weird evangelical, like, the Republican base that's so different than everywhere else. But for people who know it, and I try to argue, be the devil's advocate out there, they know that, John Huntsman saying he's going to skip because of ethanol is just, that doesn't make sense. Like, people who know it know that ethanol is not, everyone doesn't walk around going, I love ethanol. Don't bash on that.
We got to get going. The Schwartz Award is being presented at Hamilton Hall at 3 o'clock. John Ahrens is going to be winning it. You want to say something about that, Dave? Okay. That'd be fine. All right. Great. And I want to thank all of you, and I thank the panelists.
Thank you. Before you go, my name is Dave Kearns. I'm the chair of the Greenwood School Advisory Council. I just want to say two things. Thank you to Chris. Thank you very much. And to Carol Nickel for emceeing today. I also wanted to thank Andy Messersmith and Kim McDonough for putting together a day's event. So please let's give them a round of applause. And as Chris was suggesting, we are giving away the 2012 or 2011. Is it 11? It is 11 this year. The James Schwartz Award, which is the highest award that the Greenleaf School of Journalism and Communication gives out each year. I am very privileged to have been last year's nominee. I really do hope it is a special event, and everyone here is invited. So please come join us at Hamilton Hall. It is a bit of a walk, but it's a beautiful day, chilly but crisp fall day on a great campus. Thank you again for a great day. Thank you to the panelists. Have a great day, and please join us over at Hamilton.